Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannic, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. Today we have Kimberly Carroll. She is an amazing coach, a coach for change makers, and I love what she does. I'm excited for you all to hear about it. But first, I want to introduce you to a new project that Compassionate Living is partnering with, and that is the Vegan Studies Initiative at Arihanta Institute. So we have had a few of the professors from Arihanta Institute on the show, including my husband, Kojin, but also Dr. Jonathan Dickstein, Dr. Christopher Miller. Arihanta is a Jain university. Jainism is one of the Dharma religions out of India, and their highest tenet is ahimsa, non-harming. Arihanta Institute has a variety of classes on Jain ethics and philosophy and ahimsa, and they just launched this Vegan Studies Initiative with a full program of vegan education. And you can even get a master's degree in vegan studies. They're hosting a monthly speaker series, which is free. And then they have public facing classes, meaning that anyone can join them. You don't have to be enrolled in the graduate program. So I'm right now taking their first public course in this Vegan Studies Initiative, and it's called Jainism, Veganism, and Engaged Religion. And I'm really loving this 4-week course. It's been excellent. They have these videos, self-paced kind of video lectures that you watch on your own time through the week, and then papers that you read. And then the class gets together once a week on Friday for a Q&A with the professors, and we can discuss the material and ask them questions. And I already knew quite a bit about the connection of veganism and Jainism, but this class has really taken my knowledge to a new level. And the next class later in the summer is about greenwashing in animal agriculture. It's with Dr. Vasile Stanescu, who has been on the podcast before as well, and who recently spoke at our Humane Hoax online conference. And this class that he's teaching, it's called Debunking the Myth of Sustainable and Humane Animal Agriculture, and it's going to really go in depth on the environmental issues like grass-fed and sustainable and regenerative grazing. Vasile is so knowledgeable about all this really critical stuff. It's critical knowledge that we need to have, especially around regenerative grazing, as this is going to be coming up more and more as a solution to the climate crisis, and we need to be able to talk about it. We need to be able to explain why it's not a viable solution. So I really encourage everyone to take this course. This course starts in August, on August 5th, and runs for 4 weeks. It does cost money, but these are courses with PhDs, with professors, a really high caliber of instruction. But Arihanta Institute has given me a coupon code so that my podcast listeners, you all, get a special discount for enrolling. It's 25% off the tuition cost. And that coupon code is debunk25 with an exclamation point. It's all capital letters, DEBUNK 25 exclamation point, debunk 25 exclamation point, to get 25% off this course called Debunking the Myth of Sustainable and Humane Animal Agriculture. I'm going to have all this information in the show notes, a link to the course and the coupon code, what the coupon code is that you can put in. I really hope to see you in this class. I'm going to try to take it as well. So, this new Vegan Studies Initiative program also has a free monthly speaker series, and their next speaker is coming up on July 15th. And I think this one's going to be really, really interesting. It's Dr. Cheryl Abate, who is an assistant professor at the University of Nevada. And she's going to be speaking about complicated ethical questions around the gray areas of veganism, like taking vegan to a deeper level, like the issues around sea life of oysters and mussels and scallops, right? Or what about eggs from a chicken that's living at an animal sanctuary? These kind of gray area issues. And her talk, I'll read a little bit here. It says, "We'll create a moral framework that enables us to answer these and other related complicated questions about animal ethics in a morally consistent way." So, this presentation's called New Ethical Issues in Contemporary Veganism. It's on Monday, July 15th, and I'll put a link to that one as well in the show notes so you can go and register, and that one is free. So, I really encourage you to check out this new Vegan Studies initiative from Arihanta Institute. And if you're considering possibly going back for a graduate degree, if you want to work in animal advocacy, there is a lot of competition out there now to get jobs. And this could be a great way, to be competitive in the animal advocacy job space with a master's degree in vegan studies. Really awesome. I love it. Education is so important for so many reasons. So I really, really love this new program. And I think you are also going to love our guest today. So let's transition into our conversation with Kimberly. She is doing really vital work in the animal advocacy movement, and she is also a really lovely human being. So I think you're going to enjoy our conversation. Here we go. Okay, so today we have Kimberly Carroll. Kimberly Carroll is a coach for changemakers, campaign strategist with Animal Justice, director of Animal Justice Academy, and a director with the Toronto Vegetarian Food Bank. With over 14 years as a coach and almost 20 years as an activist, Kimberly works with mission driven leaders, social entrepreneurs, and other activists on high performance habits and strategies to make them unstoppable. She's helped empower thousands of activists and counseled those in high stress positions like undercover investigators. She's also passionate about environmental activism, democratic reform, and amplifying Indigenous and Black voices. Welcome to the podcast, Kimberly.
Hello, Hope. Hello to you, and hello to the whole community here. It's really great to be with you all.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. I've really been looking forward to our conversation. I love your work. I love the work you do. And it's inspired me to kind of listen to a few of your workshops again because I
Aw.
try to keep up with them. But first, let's start with the first question that we ask all our guests, and that is, why and when did you go vegan?
Yes, our origin stories. Well,
Yes.
okay. So mine, I certainly don't have a really simple one. It had a few phases. So I'll go back to kind of the beginning of it. And I grew up on the prairies in farm country. And right from a really early age, I was a huge animal lover. I really adored animals. I just had a special place in my heart. I also happen to be a huge lover of meat. I loved eating meat. I'm embarrassed to say right now, but I loved KFC. I loved steak was my favorite. People used to make fun of me about how much I loved meat. Me and my dad, we hated like
Mm.
vegetarian meals when it was, Friday in the Catholic household of my grandparents, and there was no meat. We were both all grumpy about it.
Huh.
And so I had these two things, at odds with each other. This idea of I loved animals and I love meat. It was always nudging at me in my conscience, like, how can you be eating animals? And so I started to sort of voice that to the adults. And I was like, but these are animals, and isn't this wrong? And, again, being in farm country, it's just like, well, of course it's not wrong. Like this is just the way things are done. And this is the way things have always been done. And that
Mm.
was enough for my little kid conscience to go, okay, well, the adults say. But eventually, as a young adult, I was face down with this conundrum, really in a visceral way. I was at a friend's farm just after calving season, and
And this is in Toronto.
this is
So
in
it's sort of
Manitoba.
okay, because I
Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of trying to envision where this farm
Yeah.
area is in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. Manitoba is sort of mid Canada. It's the prairies, so
Okay.
flat land as far as you can see. You can watch your dog run away for days.
Mhm.
And so I was at a friend's place who had a farm, and it was just after calving season, so just after all, the new calves were born, and I spent the day there were twin calves on this farm, and I spent the day just hanging with them and cuddling with them. They're just like big puppies, right? And just falling in love with them. And then we got called in for dinner, and I went and sat down, and they were serving my favorite steak, and I couldn't avoid it any longer. I looked down, and I remember thinking in my head, this is going to be the calves in 2 years.
Mm.
And in my mind, I said, Kimberly, your ethics can be stronger than your taste buds. And in that moment, my love of animals became just a little stronger than my love of meat. And that's when I went vegetarian. And so that was 27 years ago. It was before the internet. So at that point, I still didn't know anything about the egg or dairy industry, the bigger egg and dairy industry. And then within the next few years, as that became clear about what was happening, and just, that dairy cows and egg laying chickens are some of the most abused animals on our planet, I then needed to go vegan. So it was a double punch of the same week. I saw Earthlings. Earthlings had just come out, and then I saw Peaceable Kingdom, and the double punch of those. First of all, I became an activist, and then I became a vegan a few days later.
Wow.
So after watching Earthlings, I just went, oh my God, this is I just, the scale of it just was so huge, the suffering and the
Mm.
degree of suffering. And I thought, I can't just not eat them anymore. I have to actually do something. So I didn't really know what that would be exactly. I've been doing a little bit of light activism here and there, but at that point, I committed completely to activism.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a similar thing that I had when I was a child in that I loved dairy. But I
Mm,
also loved animals, and I had
yeah.
pictures of animals all over my walls when I was a kid. I was really into animals, but I loved dairy. And when I would go visit my grandmother, they had a joke. They would say, "Oh, the cow's coming." And like they connected me with the milk, and they would buy an extra gallon of milk because I was
Mm,
coming to visit for the weekend.
wow.
So interesting, right? That we can have that disconnect.
Mm,
And then of course, similar to you, when I got a little older, I learned about the horrors of the dairy industry. And I loved how you said that your love of animals outweighed your love of meat or dairy. And that's
mhm.
exactly, what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of our work as animal advocates is to not only show people what has actually happened to animals and what we're complicit in when we are eating, meat, dairy, and eggs, but to also remind people of who these beings are, that the degree of sentience and personality and pains and fears and love, and we have to do these two very different things at the same time. We have to both be the mean wake up person, wake up, no, figure out what's happening in this world, but we also have to be the ones who try to bring people closer to who the victims are, and what they're all, what these beings are all about.
Yeah. So you actually, the work that you're doing now that you've kind of grown into is around activist empowerment and supporting vegans and animal activists with burnout and boundaries and conflict resolution. And I think that this stuff is so important now.
Mm.
after, 3 decades myself, 3 decades
Oh my
of
goodness. Wow. Yeah.
being in this work, so it's really, I think, so important because we see people get passionate, get excited, and then they're gone. They come and
Yeah.
go because it's very hard work. Um,
Oh, it's incredibly hard work.
yeah,
And one of the big ironies of this movement is, most of us are drawn to animal advocacy because we care so much about animals. We care so much about injustice. But then we get into animal advocacy, and it means we get a front row seat 24/7 to all of the suffering and injustices
yeah,
that animals experience in the world, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's a recipe for a bit of disaster. Plus, we're getting pushback from 90% of the population or more for what we believe, from what comes from our hearts.
yeah,
And then we even get pushback, often within our own movement because we're not doing the advocacy that other people might approve of or support. So there's so many things. There's also the fact, Hope, that there's so few of us doing this work around this problem of such a massive scale. And so it never feels like we're doing enough. We're always feeling overwhelmed. We're always feeling pressure to take on too much. So yeah, there's a lot of huge problems where we face as animal advocates. And that's why, yeah, that's why I do what I do. I have been working as an activist for a couple of decades now. But I really felt like, as a animal and social justice advocate, that one of the major problems we had was a disconnect from people from the issues, from being able to entertain these sort of deeper world problems. And I wanted to examine what's getting in the way of that? What is stopping people from opening their heart, of inviting everyone into their circle of compassion? And so that led me to being a coach for change makers. I've been a coach for 14 years, and I didn't start off as a coach for change makers. I just started off more as a general coach. But a few years ago, I moved my work specifically to working with activists and leaders and social entrepreneurs like animal advocates, because I felt like activists are some of the most valuable folks that we have in the world right now. We are so teetering on the edge of dropping into the abyss right now
mhm.
as a
Oh,
society. And
yeah,
I feel like change makers, we're the last line of defense, keeping the world, like we're all like have
yes.
our arms up holding
Oh,
this world from tipping
right.
over.
Uh,
And I thought, who is taking care of the caretakers? Who
mm,
are taking care of those people that are holding up our world right now? There really aren't many. There's
yeah,
really not a lot in place. And what's happening, Hope, is we're burning out at an alarming rate.
yeah.
As you said, like, yes, animal advocates, you see them come on the scene. They're, full of fire, and they do everything, and they say yes to everything, and they expose themselves to everything. And then a year later, they're gone.
Yeah.
And I just want you to get this stat. This really floored me when I first found it out. 50 to 60% of activists in the US drop out because of burnout. Okay. They burn out and they drop out permanently. That's 50 to 60% of activists in every given year.
Wow.
And so I would say, like, if that was corporate America, we'd have declared a national state of emergency over that, right?
Right.
But especially in the animal advocacy movement, that rate, where that's just considered collateral damage.
Mm,
Okay, that's just par for the course.
wow.
And I went, no, not acceptable. This is not, A, it's not good for our people in general, but B, it's not good practice. It's not smart business practice.
Yeah, there's so few of us already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And so yeah, so I've sort of done, work over the years trying to figure out, well, how do we get advocates as resilient and strategic enough as possible to, try to navigate this really challenging road we're choosing to walk down.
So then what are some of the specific things that you encounter with activists? Like, what are some of the main issues that you see that people face? And also, very importantly, what tools do you recommend to
Mm,
kind of counter that? And that's the hard part, right? That we're all feeling this. We're all caught up in whatever conflict or drama we have with the activism, but then we don't have good tools to help us to kind of step back and take care of ourselves. So, can you talk a little about that?
Oh, I can talk a lot about that. Hope. I mean, I
Great.
think this is the key thing, right? We're told that we should be more resilient. We're told we should take better care of ourselves. We're told we should love ourselves, but we don't get taught how to do any of those things,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Like these are key things. This isn't just a complaint I have about the animal advocacy movement. I have a complaint about this with the whole Western world, you know? This
yeah,
is stuff
yeah.
that should be taught in school. So, I mean, there's a lot of areas, and I mean, I'll just tell you the sort of top areas that I work with advocates around is narrowing your focus, and creating firm boundaries to prevent overwhelm. Okay, so that one of the first problems is overwhelm and the amount of work that we are taking on,
Yeah.
and so creating a focus and boundaries to deal with that. The second one that I find especially potent in the animal advocacy movement is the amount of emotional pain that comes up, and not having pain processing tools and routines for that. And then there's just the fact that being exposed to what we're exposed to, what that ends up happening is we lose our joy, we lose our health, we lose what nourishes us. So
Mhm.
so being able to put into place and habituate the things that nourish us. And so, yeah, so I don't know. Do you want to go kind of through all of those? You want to do a little bit of a little talk around each of them, or is there one in particular that appeals to you?
Well, if you can, I'd love to hear about all 3. I mean, just, at least a little piece of all 3.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, everyone has these different, and I could think of in my brain 5 more
I
other
know.
things. So,
Exactly.
yeah, there's so many aspects to it, but yes, all 3 would be great.
Okay, well, I'll just touch on a few things for each, okay? When I talk to animal advocates, I often ask, what are your biggest challenges? And it's always some sort of overwhelm that really comes to the surface.
Mm,
And what is happening again, I mentioned that because we have an issue here of 90 billion farmed animals, land animals alone being killed every year on this planet. And that's one aspect of the animal abuse we're dealing with. I mean, that's just a staggering number. And it's a staggering amount of work to be able to churn that juggernaut around. And so what happens, Hope, is we all decide that we want to help, but we don't just want to help, we want to save the world. Okay.
mm,
We think that everything lies on our shoulders. We think
yeah.
those 90 billion animals are our responsibility and our responsibility alone. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm a big proponent of, you don't need to change the whole world. You just need to change your little corner of it.
Yeah.
Okay. If all of us, even if it was just like, again, this sort of small amount of animal advocates we have, so small when you think of it, it's probably hundreds of thousands of people. Okay. But compared to the global population, it's not that many. But if all of us that were animal advocates just chose one little corner of our world and went hard on that and didn't burn out and were able to focus on it, oh my God, we would be so effective.
Yeah.
And so that's why getting laser focused is really important. I tend to ask people to really focus in when they're deciding how to do their animal advocacy, to figure out what is it form of advocacy that really works for you, because of your personality or because of your skills or your experience, your background, and to really identify where could you make the biggest impact, okay? And where could you make the biggest impact and where could you be sustainable? You could maybe make the biggest impact by being an undercover investigator, but if it's going to kill you, it's not the right thing for you,
Yeah.
okay? If it's just going to absolutely destroy you, not the right thing for you. So figuring out that sort of blend of what is impactful and what could actually bring me some joy or some expansiveness by doing it. Once you have that laser focus, then it's really important to put boundaries down. Okay. It's important to be able to say no to almost everything else besides that focus. And that's really hard for us, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Hope.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, when we are being effective and impactful in one area, it is a lot easier for us to be able to say, this is so important what you're doing, but it's not my lane right now. I support you, and maybe I'll give you 5% of my time, but the rest needs to go here. So it's that, being able to put boundaries down, being able to say no. So that means not jumping into every Twitter fight you see about animal advocacy. That means
Uh-huh.
not going out to every protest that comes across your desk. It means, not putting your hand up for the things that aren't your focus,
Yeah.
and which
Yeah.
can be really hard.
Yeah, if I could add something to something that
Yeah.
I always try to tell people, especially when they're first vegan or first getting into activism, to not focus so much on friends and family, because everybody
Mm-hmm.
gets so bogged down with, oh, I have to change my family because that's who's around you, that's who you're with every day. But it's very unlikely that those are the people that are going to listen and you're going to change. It does happen sometimes, but it's rare. And I think people get very frustrated with friends and family. And I try to tell them, don't put your energies there if they're not open to hearing.
Oh,
Put your energies
absolutely.
on people who want to hear it. And there are people out there who are open and excited to hear about it. Focus on them, right?
I completely agree, Hope.
Yeah.
We have to remember our family, our friends are such a small number of people. And like you said, there are people, you could be changing thousands of people's minds if you aren't so focused on changing a few that happen to be closest to you.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm also, when you are becoming a vegan and an animal advocate, it's really important to still have your security blankets. It's important to have places where you can go and be loved, and you don't have to be trying to convert people, where you don't have to be fighting all the time. And some people feel like that's okay, it's really wrong if I can't even change my family. I'm like, you know what, maybe just let it go with your family so you have the energy to
Yeah.
change thousands of lives.
That's
I'm
right.
not, and again, it doesn't feel good to not have your family understand some of your deepest held beliefs. But my experience has been, if you live a great life as a vegan and an animal advocate, if they see that you're, very convicted and fulfilled by the work you're doing, they're going to pay attention. If you're just living what it is that you believe, it may take a lot longer, but I find that my friends and family have eventually sort of started to come along for the ride.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
it's just like not to put pressure on yourself around that, trying to change
Right.
your family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also keeping in mind that we don't need everybody. I think that's something that people get
Mm-hmm.
caught in. It's like, oh, I have to convince every single person I come in contact with. No, we
Yeah.
really don't. We just need those early adopters, those
Yeah.
change makers that are going to do the work that we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And then when we
Absolutely.
get to a certain point, it will be that bellwether, that tipping point that will
Mm-hmm.
take it to everyone. So yeah.
Absolutely. The tipping point isn't even that much high of a percentage. I think it's like, some people have surmised that if we got to 20% of a vegan
Right.
population,
Yeah.
that would pretty well do it. Like that, there
Mhm.
would be no going back after that point. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's a really amazing point, Hope.
Well, okay, so we were
Yeah,
so we were on the overwhelm.
yeah,
Let's move to the second one. What was the
yeah.
second one?
So that is the challenge of all the emotional pain that
Uh,
comes with being an animal advocate.
yeah.
And there's so much pain that comes our way as animal advocates. Like I said, the pain of all of the beings and the horrible ways they live and die that we get exposed to, over and over again as advocates, but also the pain of conflict, the pain of feeling alienated from your friends, your family, your society, because people just aren't getting something that it feels so real and so vital to you. And there's so many ways that we can, feel emotional pain as an animal advocate. And the thing is, we as a society don't understand how to process pain. And so, we as a movement certainly don't. This emotional pain that we get, actually takes up residence in our body. Okay. It's actual physiological changes in our body. And
Yeah.
so it's not enough to, just talk about the pain. Sometimes we have to really have physical exercises, visceral exercises to be able to go into and through the pain. So I mean, I'm a big fan of talking it out. I think it's really important to have, good people in place, or a counselor, or a coach, or whatever, to be able to talk things through. But I also believe that we need cathartic ways of sort of moving through our pain. So, for example, I really like something called the mind dump. It's 3 to 5 minutes of just a stream of consciousness writing. It's expressing what you're feeling right now, what's going on, what are your fears, whatever your hopes. It's like whatever it is, but it's a way of you being able to take whatever has been taking up residence in your mind and your body and get it out of you and onto the page. You can also do that through breath work. When you're feeling just some really heavy pain, just taking a couple of minutes to close your eyes and to find where in your body that pain is, and to breathe into it, and to just really get into the texture of it, like the burning of it, or the aching of it, or the heaviness of it, and really breathe into it. And on the exhale, just letting it go, just softening it, or just surrendering it, whatever sort of works for you. But the idea is, we get in trouble, Hope, when we run from pain, when we deny it. Okay. That's when pain really wreaks havoc on us.
Mm.
And people don't recognize that if you just have some tools to be able to kind of sit in the pain a little bit and move through it, it actually isn't so bad. Pain is actually something we can all deal with if we have the right tools.
Good. Okay, so that's the second. And what was the third one?
The third one is habituating what nourishes you. So,
Mm.
again, when you're an animal advocate, you're looking at just so many challenges, and it's hard work, and it's slow, it's slogging. And so we have to be very conscious of being able to feed ourselves. Okay. We're giving of ourselves, which, is really important. There are countless animals out there that are depending on us, working on their behalf. But if we are just completely giving all the time, and we're not replenishing, that's when we burn out. Okay.
Yeah.
That is when we burn out in terms of we just hit a wall, or we burn out with compassion fatigue. We can't feel anything anymore. And so if we want to be truly effective and enduring as animal advocates, we need to find what nourishes us, and we need to make it a habit. Okay. We need to routinize it. And so that's obviously really different for everybody. And a lot of people push back against this, Hope, because there is such a sense of urgency and such a sense of guilt when we stop to, say, build health or joy or rest into our schedule. People are like, but the animals don't have a rest. The animals feel no joy. And I'm like, yes, but that is not the world we're trying to build. We're trying to build a world where every being has a chance to feel freedom and rest and joy. And so it needs to start here. It needs to start now, at least in
Mm.
small ways. The other byproduct of not taking care of yourself, of not giving yourself any joy, any rest, any nourishing, is you will become very ineffective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you are not feeding yourself, you run out of gas, and you no longer, that means you could run out of patience. It means you could run out of creativity. You could run out of vitality. None of those are good for your movement. Okay. If you're impatient and you're getting angry and frustrated at someone, you're just going to be one of those vegans that turns everybody off. Right. If you are someone who is joyless or unhealthy, people are going to look to you and go, oh, wow, that's what animal advocacy is like. I'm not getting anywhere near there. So you're not being a good poster person for your movement, right?
Yeah.
And so your job isn't just to be doing stuff. It's also, what are you modeling? What are you modeling in this world? And if you can't model that you are a person that has something that other people want to emulate, then you're not going to do a great job of converting more people to our cause. So really
Yeah.
habituating what nourishes you. I mean, for me, it is it's downtime with no obligations. For me, it's called I call it a sacred Sunday. So every Sunday I try to take one day where I have nothing on my schedule, no obligations. I don't do anything out of obligation. I try to feel into what I want to do, what my body wants to do. If that means sleeping, having lots of naps, or if that means calling up a friend I haven't seen for a while, that's great. But I do nothing in advance, and I just try to follow the rhythms of my own body. For
Mm,
other people, it might be about being in community more, being around other people who really understand and can hold you.
yeah.
For other people, it may be about just pure outdoor time, like being in nature is what replenishes you. But whatever it is, it needs to happen regularly. Okay. For me, I have a daily practice, Hope. I don't know if you do, but I have a daily practice every morning. I start off, I meditate, I listen to something that inspires me. I journal, I do an appreciation list, and I usually do some sort of form of physical exercise. So, and if I didn't do that, I've been doing this now for as an activist for almost 20 years. I wouldn't have survived. There's no way.
Mm, mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, self-care is so important. And I like that almost everything, I think everything that you suggested in all those options for self-care didn't cost any money.
No, absolutely
Because
not.
that's something I think that, you hear. I mean, like, yeah, sure, I would love to get a massage and go to
Mhm.
therapy every week, but I can't
Yes.
afford that.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to go on a 3 month sabbatical. Like,
Yeah, right.
yes. But I can't. So what I do is I do a 45-minute sabbatical every morning.
Ah,
You know?
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. So, finding things that are just kind of daily joys and
Mhm.
things that make you smile, even if it's something small. I think that can be huge, just
Yeah.
if, like you said, if you do it repetitively and habitually and lean into it as a self-care tool. Yeah.
And not just as, some people I think self-care has gotten such a bad, sort of rap. I mean,
Yeah.
oh, bubble baths and
Right, right.
massages. No, it's simply the act of making sure you are healthy and vital. There's nothing better we could do as advocates than to be healthy and vital. Like we need that
Yeah.
for every form of advocacy there is. We need the energy and we need the vitality to be able to come up with good ideas, to have great interactions with people that make them want to inspire them to change,
Mm,
to be able to do, an all night preparation for a campaign, like
yeah.
we need to be healthy and vital.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk about, I'm going to take us in a different direction. I
Yeah.
want to talk about a recent workshop that you gave about conflict.
Mm.
I just watched it and it was just so powerful. And I was like, yes, 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 all the way through. And talking about like something that actually I talked about on the last episode of this podcast with Honey
Mm.
LeBronx, the vegan drag queen.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, she was talking about radical compassion. I don't know if she
Mm.
used those words, but it was like compassion. And her example was, can you have compassion for Trump voters? Can you
Mhm.
have compassion, for what we would consider perhaps the enemy, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of got into that, and I really loved that. And I have a couple of quotes
Mm.
from your talk. You said, "What harms one of us ultimately harms all of us."
Mhm.
And to think about saying, this is what you said, to think about that my job is to change hearts and minds, not to win, that our power is in bridge building as opposed to going to battle.
Mhm.
And I loved all of that. I think that it's so important, especially with the online world and social media. We get so caught up and you see something, you want to react to it. You're like, oh no, that's, they're being horrible or they don't understand or whatever it is. And anyway, I think that this is just something in our modern world that really we need to think about and address. And like you said, if you also said, it was, I'm going to give another quote.
Mm.
This
I
one's a
love being quoted. Hey.
oh, good, good. Well, this one's a paraphrase. You said something like, if you want to respond, like if that's your reaction, is you want to type something right then really quick, don't step back, because that's
Mhm.
when you do not want to
Yeah.
respond. So anyway, I'd love you to
Yeah,
talk
I
a little
love.
more about all this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes. So that has been one of my best rules of thumb. The more that you feel an impulse to respond is equal to how much you should step back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that has saved me many times. So yeah, there's someone right now that I have been in friction with, and I have literally given this almost a week because that's how charged I was.
Wow.
So, and by the time I write back, I should have my sanity about me again, and hopefully I will respond in a very much more effective way, a much more compassionate and effective way. I think this all really comes down to the idea that Martin Luther King Jr. intimated with his quote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that."
Mm.
We're really tempted to try to get that certain dramatic win, where we conquer.
Yeah.
And the fact is that in order for the animals to have a world in which they are free and cared for, it's going to need to be a very compassionate, very justice oriented world. And we are not going to build that world by hating on others, by decimating them, by othering them. We are only going to achieve that world by building bridges. I'm really of the mind that to be able to approach our activism with a sense of compassion also for humans. Now that, okay, and this is the part that gets misconstrued. So I need to be really clear on this. That does not mean not standing up strongly and sometimes very fiercely and consistently for animals. But it means not making the other the enemy, the evil one, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call them. People do bad things. They're not bad. The issue is shame. When we shame people, it brings out the worst in
Mm.
people. Like they
Yeah.
get triggered so badly. Like
Yeah.
if you call somebody bad, that you're a bad person, they will not listen to another word you ever say. Okay, the walls will come up and the defense mechanisms will slide into place. And so othering somebody and shaming them, just it doesn't work well in the long run. It doesn't work well for making the kind of world that will have long lasting, deep peace and compassion. Really, at the end of the day, it's understanding a few things. It's understanding that everybody could be a potential ally.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
everyone that you interface with, as unlikely as it might seem, could potentially be an ally at some point. Another thing that I find that's so important to keep my judgment at bay is to remember that people are doing the best they can from the level of awareness and capability they're at.
Mm.
Okay. So if people are behaving badly, it's because they haven't learned a better way of behaving.
Mm.
It's because they, for example, if somebody is an unapologetic meat eater, they were maybe never taught compassion for animals. Okay, or they were raised in a way that they couldn't be open-minded enough to hear new information and change accordingly. And that's sad. To me, that's sad. I'm not going to hate that person. I'm going to feel kind of badly for them. What
Yeah.
that does for an advocate is it first of all takes the monsters out of the picture. It stops having, like when we have monsters that we're fighting, that makes us feel very disempowered. Okay,
Mm.
monsters are very overpowering. That makes us disempowered. So let's take the monsters out of it, so that we're not fighting monsters. We're just working with people that are kind of vulnerable and kind of like don't have a lot of capacity right now.
Yeah.
How do we increase people's capacity to care? That's what the question is. That's what we work with.
Mm.
So I don't like to villainize people. I want to villainize acts and systems, but not the people themselves. Does that make sense, Hope?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really well said. And a tool that I'd like to offer when we're in these conflicts in public, I mean, it's a public forum, right? The
Mm-hmm.
social media is a public forum. So you're really, if you are going back and forth and you're, being aggressive, and that person is going to feel like they're attacked in public, right?
Hmm.
And that's going to, I think, bring up a lot of defense mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
So they're not going to be open to hearing whatever you have to say. I think that private messaging is really, I like to say private messaging is your friend and makes friends, because
Hmm.
I've had this happen before where I've kind of had a little bit of a back and forth with someone,
Hmm.
and I've decided to private message them
Yeah.
and just say, hey, I just kind of wanted to take this to a more private place. I hear what you're saying. I understand. Here's my thoughts on it. I just kind of didn't want to have it be public anymore. And I
Mm.
have had such wonderful luck with that, with people coming back and just being more open and feeling more like they can really talk because it's a private setting.
I
Um,
love that. Yes.
yeah.
And I've had the exact same experience.
Yeah.
When we started Animal Justice Academy, which is the other big project that I work on.
Yeah.
And it's a training program for animal advocates. And when we launched it, that was one of my experiments that I wanted to do. I was wanting to see if we could really make compassionate community cornerstone. And so I knew that was going to end up, taking up a lot of my time, but I thought it was valuable because we had coming on right off the bat 5,000 people, and there were veteran advocates, there were newbies, there were non-veg folks, there were dog people, horse people, there were everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of friction happening in our private Facebook group. It could have been a veteran person versus a non-veg person. It could be like a horse person versus a vegan. It could, it was like
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of things. And so, I really found that the best thing to do was exactly what you said, was to drop into the DMs and to be able to go to this person who was obviously not taking in the information and was being very closed, but to just be able to put myself in their shoes and go, okay, what's coming up for them? To just really imagine. And if I didn't know what was coming up, then I'd have a little exchange with them. I'd be able to, talk to them and say, so how did that feel? And what is it that hurts you most about this or scares you most about this? What was being talked about? And then from there, you can go, oh, I can see why that would be scary. I can see why you felt like really disparaged by that. And so acknowledging that, but also recognizing something noble in them, to really, that can really help from people's guards going up, is to just kind of be able to communicate to them that you see they're not a bad person, that there's some good in them. And I tell you, every time it worked, every time. And that person went back into those posts and they started doing bridge building, and it completely U-turned the conversation.
Wow.
And so if we can all do a little bit of our own self-coaching that way, it can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, so you talked about the Animal Justice Academy
Mm-hmm.
that you run, that you host. Tell us more about that and how someone can kind of plug in and get involved. What does it entail? What are you trying to do? Tell us about the Animal Justice Academy.
Yeah, so the Animal Justice Academy, it's an arm of Animal Justice, our organization in Canada. It's one of the top animal advocacy organizations in the country. And this was a project that I had on my mind for 2 or 3 years before I actually did it, because I just felt like every time, say, our group would put out an undercover investigation or something like that, we'd get it on major news media, and we'd have people from across the country saying, oh my God, this is horrible. What can we do? What can we do? We'd have so many people wanting to volunteer and, sign petitions and everything. But, as most animal advocacy groups, we don't have a lot of resources. We're
Mm.
lean, mean machines, right?
Uh-huh.
We certainly can't manage, thousands of volunteers. And so I thought, what a shame, because this is happening with animal advocacy organizations everywhere. There's all these people who care deeply. They want to get involved, but they don't know how to get involved. And so I went, we should have a program that equips people to be able to do animal advocacy no matter where they are, no matter who they are, and no matter, sort of what their background is, that they can find some form of animal advocacy that they can do on their own, or at least to start on their own, and they can build on that. And so that's where the Animal Justice Academy came from. It's started off as a 6-week training program that can now be done as just a self-paced program. And it's, to cover just basically all of the information you need as an animal advocate in various areas of animal exploitation, and sort of what the facts and, history and all the sort of data is that it's good to have, to be able to feel confident when you're being an advocate, but also, all the things to worry about environmentally, health wise, but then also to start giving ideas on different ways of being animal advocates. So many people, when they first think about being an animal rights activist, they think the only thing that you do is stand with a sign yelling at people. And
Right.
even though that can be a very powerful form of activism, it's only one very small piece.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we need people advocating in their corporations. We need people advocating when they go to parent teacher interviews. We need people advocating in their churches or their mosques. We need people advocating through creativity and through art. Yeah, so the AJA was created to be able to basically teach people how to do all of the above.
Okay, great, great.
Yeah,
And it's an ongoing community, right?
it
You
is.
have
Yeah,
workshops
yeah.
regularly and
We
uh
have like a continuing education thing going on. Like we always recommend that people try to, tackle the course. And meanwhile, we're also doing a lot of live online events.
yeah.
So, every couple of weeks we have a live online event where we do a workshop, or we have somebody who's doing an exciting campaign or running a really innovative organization on to talk about strategy. And we also do collective action campaigns. We do multiple trainings around various things. We get a little bit microscopic on specific forms of advocacy that you can do as well. So it's a very active community. We have this private Facebook group that's very vibrant, a lot of collaboration going on there. It's a really wonderful place. I think it's one of the sweetest places online to be as far as animal advocacy goes.
Well, I love the work you do. I've been listening to your workshops over the last couple of years, and they've really been wonderful. So thank you for all that good work.
Aw, thank you for listening and taking the time.
So, Kimberly, it's been a really amazing conversation. I do want to ask you our last question, though, because we're getting to be out of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to ask, what gives you hope for the future?
Mm. Yeah, a lot of things. First of all, when I first became veg 27 years ago, I didn't know a vegan. I didn't know anybody who was vegan. I didn't even barely know what the word was. And now it's just like veganism, plant-based, animal advocacy. It is really well known in society. I mean, it's here. It's a part of the fabric of our society now. The fact that there are vegan options at almost most places you can go in major cities, but even in the small towns, even in my hometown in Brandon, Manitoba, there's so many vegan options. I also love the fact that our movement is becoming so much more wide and diverse. I love that advocates are thinking in terms of intersectionality, that all oppressions are overlapping, and that, we have all sorts of allies in our racial justice movements, in our environmental movements, and that we're starting to look at that, and they're starting to look at us similarly. Again, we have a long way to go. Here in Canada, legally, it had been 100+ years since we had gotten a new bill passed around animal protection, and now we've gotten at least 5 or 6, and we have about 3 more in the funnel right now. And so, and I mean, that's for, again, a country that has been pretty backward on animal advocacy. And so the legal changes that are happening around the world, especially in some of the more progressive countries, has been so impressive. There are a lot of newer animal advocates that go, oh, it's just, we're not getting anywhere, or this is going nowhere. And I'm like, You have no idea when you look at it from my view.
Right.
Holy crap.
Right.
Things are night and day.
Yeah, we've come
And
so
it's
far.
even and
Yeah.
in just the last 5 years, the unbelievable acceleration on that. I'm just super excited to know what's going to happen in the next 5, 10 years.
Mm. Yeah, me too. I feel that
Mhm.
energy as well. I think that that's so true.
Yeah.
You see new activists, people coming in and they're like, "Oh, it's just we got to do something different. We're not," and that's good. I'm glad they've got
Yes,
that energy. Yeah, mix it up. Let's try something new. But
absolutely.
but we really have done well, I think, the activists
Hmm.
of the last decades and generations, because we have come so far. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
I mean, I when I started in Toronto as a vegan and an activist, I don't know what, so let's say 18 years ago, we used to have potlucks. We used to have
Oh,
twice
yeah.
monthly
Yep.
vegan
Mhm.
potlucks, and that was pretty well it for the
Yeah, it was the
activism
only
scene.
thing going on. Yeah.
And
Same.
now, we have these,
Just everything, so many.
animal marches, and I'm like, who are
Yeah.
all these people? And I've never
Yeah.
seen them before.
It's
I love
great.
it. I love it.
Yes.
So I need to acknowledge that we absolutely have an Everest that we are climbing right now,
Sure.
in terms of where we need to go. But we need to look back and go, wow, we have come a long way, and we're
Yeah.
only picking up speed, and our lungs are only getting stronger and stronger. And so, yeah, and I think we need to really be able to focus on that,
Yeah. Yeah.
that really sort of accelerating pace that we're starting to go at.
Yes. Very hopeful.
Hmm.
So, Kimberly, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Would you like to let us know how people can get in touch with you, get involved, like the work that you're doing? We're going to have a bunch of links in the show notes that you
Yeah.
have provided, but just let us know what you'd like to tell us about how they can get in touch with you or involved.
Well, yes, thank you, Hope, because I always try to have so many free resources. I want this work to be accessible to everybody. So, one of the first things I want to say is, if you're not part of Animal Justice Academy, please join us, animaljusticeacademy.com. And plus, in the 6 week course, Hope, all of the things we were talking about, advocate wellness, our whole 6th week of the program is about that. Okay, so there's plenty of materials there. I also do something called the change maker sessions, at least once a month, sometimes more. And these are free workshops that I do on Wednesday evenings for social justice advocates. So, from all social justice realms, but I always have lots of animal rights people join us. And there again to teach anything from how to find more focus and create more boundaries, to how to deal with when your closest people don't get you, to strategies for persuasion. And you can find that information at my website, kimberlycarroll.com. And I'd love to see you there.
Wow, such great work and great resources. And we'll have links in the show notes. Thank you for all the work you're doing, Kimberly.
Oh, Hope, thank you for all the work you're doing. This podcast is amazing. You have great guests, and you ask wonderful, compassionate questions. So thank you for that.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. Okay, so I don't think I've asked in a while, so I'm going to go ahead and ask if you would please give us a 5-star rating if you're listening in a podcast app. If you're listening to this podcast on an app, please go find it. Sometimes you have to kind of dig around to find, but please find the ratings and give us a 5-star rating, and maybe write a review if you haven't yet, or if you haven't in a while. It doesn't need to be long, it just needs to be nice. Please say nice things. That would be wonderful and very helpful for us. If you want another way to help, please share this episode on your social networks. Help us to reach more listeners so that we can continue to have these deep, moving, imperative conversations. And I hope that this conversation today with Kimberly helped you in some way, maybe to feel not so alone in your vegan journey and any struggles that you might be having. it can be challenging, to move through the world at odds with everything. Once you become sensitive and aware of the cruelty and the suffering, suddenly you can just see it everywhere, right? On packaging, on signs, in ads, and all your media, on your family and friends' plates. You have to start compartmentalizing and smile and pretend that it doesn't bother you. And I think for some of us, this can take a toll on our psyche. And I think that's why some of us give up, give in to the mainstream, go back to eating animals. But for those of us where that is not an option, our eyes are open, we will never go back, then we have to start figuring out how to deal with this onslaught and with what that means for us moving through this world where there is so much normalized violence. But it can also be freeing. There's a feeling of freedom, freedom from the participation in that violence. So there's a peace and a contentment that can come from being vegan as well, right? So there's both. And different people have different degrees of these sometimes contradicting feelings. But when those challenging feelings arise, we have to take care of ourselves around that, being kind to ourselves and countering the suffering with kindness and compassion, not only for the animals, but for ourselves as well. So be kind, take good care of yourself, and live vegan.